And I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation that you had with Andy Clarke about this fight and a lot more.
Yeah, so we'll get into that now, shall we? So Andy Clarke is someone who has been around the sport of boxing for a very long time. He's now the lead commentator for the biggest broadcaster in the country, Sky Sports. He's done all the major shows as a lead commentator of recent times. Joshua versus Dubois at Wembley Stadium. He's been out to Saudi and covered all of those events. If you've watched any of the Riyadh season broadcasts, um, Andy is almost always on the kind of presentation side of things alongside Dev Sani and whoever else they've got in. So he's really become a significant voice in boxing. And I catch up with him about Edwards versus Yafai. We speak about all sorts of other stuff like 2025 boxing, the amount of boxing which is coming up. But we kick things off talking about his book, which is called The Knockout: Sport's Most Decisive Moment. And it is what it says on the tin. And the first question I asked Andy was, did he enjoy writing the book? And if he did, what was it he enjoyed about doing so?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It came out at the start of June. Good timing, this actually, because the paperback in time for Christmas. Unbelievable Christmas gift that comes out at the start of December. But I did really enjoy it. It had been quite a long time in the works, in the pipeline, before we got the deal for it over the line, because convincing publishers who don't just do sport or who don't just specialize in subjects like boxing, and there aren't that many publishers like that around, but there are some. But convincing a kind of more general publisher to do boxing is quite hard, because what publishers generally have is that any idea that comes from anyone to get ticked will go past a kind of independent panel that they put together. This is how it works pretty much everywhere, as I understand it, and they will decide really whether they think it's a book that people will actually buy. So they won't be necessarily employed by the publisher. There'll be a kind of, it's almost like selecting a jury. And often with boxing, they decide, no, I don't think people will really want to read about that, because it is quite a niche sport. And there are quite a lot of people out there still who just fundamentally object to it. So it can be quite a tough sell, but we got it over the line, by which point I was really ready to go. I think I got called with the news that it was happening late May, the year before last, and I was on the pier in Bournemouth. It was Bilham Smith fight week, and I think that afternoon I had a chat with Scott Welch, me and Matt Macklin on Macklin's Take, and I used that in the book. I thought I may as well just get rolling immediately. And the great thing about it was that people were just really willing to talk, to the point where arranging chats is never easy because people are busy. But at the same time, I had a target list of people. I thought, if I can get all of these, then if I got nobody else, I can do it. But then you know that you probably will get other people. And my target list were people I actually do know. So when you know them, you can kind of put them under a bit more pressure to do it and chivvy them along a bit. And then with everybody else, I just thought, okay, most of them who were kind of on the list of people who I would really have liked but weren't absolutely key, I thought I'll probably see them between now and the end of the year, which was how long I had to write it, basically. And rather than try to arrange anything, I'll then just take my chances and try and pounce on people. And that's what I did. And that worked. That worked well. So it's one of those things where you do just end up completely obsessing about it. But that's fine, because I was really interested in it. And if you get to the end and you finished it and you're still as interested in it at the end as you were at the start, and with me, I was probably even more interested in it by the time I finished than I was when I started, then you're onto a winner, because that's the most basic thing. If you've lost interest in it, then how are you really going to expect anybody to read it? But if at least you are enthusiastic about it, then um, that's the main thing. Because I think all that matters really when you do something like this is you get to the end and you feel like you did your best. There's always the odd person you could have got and all the rest of it, but you feel like you did your best. You feel like you did it justice, and you're proud of it. And then whatever people think of it, it's just kind of whatever they think of it, really. because I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? Boxers always say, don't they, if you can look yourself in the mirror and know that, win, lose or draw, that you're happy with what you did, then you can walk away satisfied. And I definitely did that. So, it was good. Yeah, I would definitely like to write something again. I'm not quite sure what, because you really do need to find a subject that you are just up to your eyeballs in and absolutely fascinated by, because at times it can be quite hard work, because you find your windows for writing, and particularly after my daughter was born, that got more difficult.
So, Andy, that's your book, The Knockout. Like I said, it is a great book. The easiest place to get it will be Amazon, and so it's coming out on paperback. Is it Christmas time?
Yeah, start of December. It's been out in hardback since the start of June. Audible, all that kind of thing. I did the voice recording for it, actually, which was quite good fun. Took a couple of days. It's quite hard because it'd be a lot harder if you're reading someone else's book. Reading your own book definitely makes it easier. But there's definitely points where you start to feel like you're going slightly mad and losing the ability to move your mouth and speak properly, because it's not that often that you spend an entire day just talking. But yeah, that was I quite enjoyed it though. But yeah, anyway, paperback is out start of December, just in time for Christmas.
Perfect timing. And I'll tell you what you just said there about the Audible version, the audiobook version. I can't ever get on with people's books if they're read by someone else. So, like for example, I've just been listening to Buncey's new book, Around the World in 80 Fights, and like with the stories in it, nobody else could do those stories justice, could they? Like it has to be the author. I don't know if you feel the same about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I totally understand that some people won't want to do it. They won't feel like it's in their wheelhouse. But Buncey's kind of book, which is essentially a sort of, I've not read it yet. I've got it, but I haven't read it yet. A boxing travelogue, just wild tales from all his time in the sport. He was there for all of them, I would think,
Mm,
like these
yeah.
80 fights. So he has to read it. And he's well capable of it, and yeah, he probably, like me, probably quite enjoyed it. But yeah, he has to, because that has to be in his tone of voice. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's and then if it's not the person who's actually written it who reads it, it's not like you should ever get someone who's going to try and impersonate them. But it needs to be someone who at least sounds a bit like them, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
it does. The
you
voice and
wouldn't you wouldn't want
it
to get
needs to have
someone from, yeah, you wouldn't want to get someone from, I don't know, you wouldn't want to get someone from Bristol reading Ricky Burns's book. I mean, that'd sound weird, wouldn't it?
I think that'd be quite good, that from Bristol right there.
Well, it could be, yeah, it could be, but it's stuff like that, isn't it? I think you've got to go for someone who, yeah, they're not trying to impersonate them, but they do, and that's why a lot of actors do this stuff, because they're capable of kind of getting into character a bit, and
Yeah.
they'll do a bit of background on the person and maybe their kind of rhythms and stuff like that, because yeah, I think it definitely works better if whoever's written it is up for reading it.
Yeah, the character's important. And but before we go on to talk about your five versus Edwards, just from a career point of view, it looks like you're in a really good place. You know, like lead commentator on Sky Sports, and have been for quite a while now. You've been involved in those monstrous nights. I think probably the most recent one was Joshua versus Dubois at Wembley Stadium, those kind of gigs. But then you also still get to go and do those lovely, like little your call shows, like which seems so wonderfully old school. You must be enjoying all of that, just to be able to kind of still be dipping your toes in that stuff, as well as being involved in those massive occasions.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll always want to do that. It works really well, actually, the kind of balance of it, because Sky are kind of happy for me to do, kind of win it within reason, whatever I want outside of them. They're sensible about that, which is good, because not when I worked in football previously, people weren't always, even though technically speaking, they couldn't tell you who else you could and couldn't work for because you're not under contract with them. Because I'm not under contract with Sky. They would still try and do that and make it clear that, well, if you go and work for them, then that might jeopardize our relationship, and it's out of order. It's not, you're freelance, you know what it's like. But they're really good like that. And yeah, the Box Nation cards, we worked on one the other day, didn't we? We've got another one coming up. It's great to see fighters come through. I do some of Johnny Clark's show, the top tier shows in Brentwood. I'm always looking to do the amateurs, international amateur stuff. That's in an interesting place at the minute, obviously, but I've been working for IBA for a long time and taking out the politics of it, which is increasingly difficult. They put on really good tournaments and really good shows, and then there's podcasts and stuff like that. And Macklin's take has been a bit stop-start, to say the least, on me and Macklin the last a couple of years, really. But hopefully there's something coming which will bring it back pretty much full time. So I think it's that kind of balance is really enjoyable, and that's kind of what our world is like, really. I don't know if I would really want to just work for one person and just work at one place. Yeah, I've never done that. I've been freelance my entire career, basically, and you get so used to it that the kind of what would frighten other people about it, maybe, or just make them a bit nervous, would be the insecurity of it. But once you get used to that, and you just kind of surrender to the fact that all you can do is do the best job you can every time you turn up and choose not to worry about it. It takes a while, but once you get there, you can just relax. It's weird because once you kind of admit to yourself and accept the fact that there are so many things you don't control, really everything is out of your hands, you can relax. Which doesn't seem to make sense at all, but that's really how that goes.
Yeah, sometimes that's easier said than done. But you mentioned in a previous sentence there around doing a lot of the stuff in terms of the amateurs and AIBA, and this week's headliners, Galal Yafai and Sonny Edwards, have both had successful amateur careers. Galal Yafai, more than Sonny, went on to an Olympic gold. Did you ever get to commentate on either of them when they were amateurs, or did you get to see them? And if you did, can you remember much about it?
So not Sonny. He was a bit unlucky with GB because he kept beating really good fighters. I think he beat the world number one, a Kazakh, at one point, but he just couldn't get that. He couldn't get that number one berth, and he had some injuries as well, so it just didn't really work out for him. Galal I saw plenty because he obviously boxed in Rio and in Tokyo, so I would have seen him at, I think, 3 world championships, a European championships, and WSB. So I saw him plenty. Traveled to some quite interesting places with that kind of cohort of fighters, and yeah, 2-time Olympian. He's been at the very top of amateur boxing, or was at the very top of amateur boxing for a really long time. So when you look at that fight, there is a difference in experience between the two. But I think the key differential between them is the amount of times that Sonny has done 10 or 12 rounds. It's not really their overall boxing experience, because Galal's got an absolute ton of that. He hasn't got as much in the pros, but he's got a ton of very, very high level experience in the amateurs, and WSB as well. 5 3-minute rounds, smaller gloves, all that kind of thing. That does prepare you a little bit better. That's coming back, I think, from what I hear, that competition, which would be great, because there's a kind of generation of fighters who managed to slipstream into the pros easier, I think, and move quicker because they had WSB. Lomachenko stuck around for an extra year after London, and Usyk specifically to boxing WSB and get 6, 7, 5 rounders under their belt, or however many it was that they had, and then turn pro. And it was such a beneficial thing, and he did quite a lot of that. And it was interesting seeing him as things kind of went along, just get closer and closer and closer, and then just do the big one, which is the Olympics, obviously, because he was always good, and he was just gathering experience. And by the time he won that Olympic gold medal, he really was a very well-rounded fighter. he was capable of doing it a number of different ways. Technically good, but also physically strong. And he'll need all of that against Sonny Edwards. He's a very interesting guy. We got him on the podcast, me and Matt. We like to say, and I think we're right actually, that it was his first kind of major appearance on, a fairly well-known platform. We had him on for about an hour and a half because we wanted to talk about how do you drive your career as a young pro, and maybe not everything is going your way. You're not signed to a big promoter. People don't seem particularly interested. You're at a lower weight. Like, how do you do it? Because you could see his world title fight, his first world title fight against Muthalani that he won was coming up at the time. And he was great. You can see with him that there's been a plan right from the very, very start. He knows how the business works. He knows exactly what boxing is. He knows or knew that at some point, if you're boxing at world level, you're going to lose. I don't think he would have expected that it would have happened the way that it did against Rodriguez, with getting injured like that and having that kind of experience. I think he probably thought it would come in a kind of close, contentious sort of points decision, his first defeat. But, he's had to get past that. And I think he probably has, because I thought he boxed well last time out. Change of trainer, which is, you'd look at it and think maybe a bit problematic, but as far as I know, from what I can tell from kind of reading between the lines, and I've not done any real digging on this, I think it's probably one of those situations where he knows exactly who he is and what he is now, Sonny Edwards. And whereas he's always really enjoyed the camaraderie of the Steel City gym and there being other fighters in there, and he manages fighters and he does other stuff, he's maybe got to the point now where he feels like it's better for him and probably better for everybody else if he goes and does his own thing, because he probably needs someone who just gives all their attention to him rather than having to kind of like share a trainer with other fighters. And also having a situation whereby the fact that he does now manage fighters, which is always going to be a source of potential conflict, the more you do that's kind of taken out of the equation too. So I don't think it's certainly not the case that he lost to Rodriguez and immediately thought, right, well, that's it, I need to change trainer. And then, had one more fight and then did it, because that's always, that rings alarm bells out, doesn't it? But that's not it. That's not what's happened.
Do you think there's a bit of a risk with Galal stepping up in the pros this early with somebody as experienced as a professional fighter as Sonny Edwards? And I know he has had a vast amount of experience, and the WSB stuff is obviously played a huge part in his development and everything else, which has made him the fighter which he is today. But he's only 8-0. If he does lose on Saturday, is that going to have a significant effect on his career going forward, or do you think it won't matter?
It depends. It depends on the manner of the defeat. If he loses, then it depends how he loses. It is a risk stepping up, but I think he's ready enough. I think ideally they would have had a couple more, a real kind of test of a different kind to the one he's had already, a test maybe similar to the kind of one that Edwards will give him. But I think he's ready enough, and you get a chance like this and you take it. If he has 12 very, very frustrating rounds where he just cannot get a hold of Sonny Edwards and he gets completely outboxed and outmaneuvered and outthought, then that will be demoralizing, and that will be a difficult one to get past, because those kinds of defeats, they're very difficult to sell to yourself. If a fighter loses, particularly for the first time, you need to be able to sell the defeat to yourself. You need to be able to come up with a reason why it happened that isn't, he's better than me. You might hear them say that on the night. You won't hear them say, oh, well, he's better than me and always will be. But what you will often hear them say in the ring is, it's a fair cop. The better man on the night won. I'll be back. Because their first reaction is usually their most honest one. And then as time progresses, what you find is that script changes, because that doesn't really work in terms of your rehabilitation. You need to find something else. So Eubank Jr. against Liam Smith was a great example. In the ring, he basically said that. Fair enough, he caught me. I thought the referee should have let it go on, which was clearly nonsense, but he said that anyway. But, hit me with a good shot, hands up. And then half an hour later, it was an elbow. I've seen a replay, and it was an elbow. And then after that, it was something else. And you latch onto anything you can to basically explain away to yourself the fact that you've lost. But if you just spend 12 rounds punching thin air, that's a very difficult thing to do, because what do you go for in that case? Maybe camp wasn't great. You could fall back on that old traditional one, or what? It's hard. So that kind of defeat, I think, is demoralising. That's the right word for it. But as long as that doesn't happen, I think it's one of those fights where you'll be able to take enough positives from it in defeat to be able to move on. I think it's going to be close. The way I look at it, I think it's going to be close. I picked Galal actually for Boxing News yesterday, not because I was trying to be contrary, but I just thought you know me well, and my kind of like MO really is to look at what's actually happened, look at experience, be painfully logical and anal about the whole thing. And that's really the only way you should do it or could do it. But every now and again, you think it's in Birmingham. I think it has come at a good time for him. And sometimes the stars just align and someone just produces that massive performance. And he is up against someone who had a damaging defeat a couple of fights ago, which could still be lingering a bit. We don't know. It didn't seem to be last time he boxed, but it could be for all we know. So I just get the feeling like it could be one of those nights. But equally, Edwards could just turn it on and win comfortably.
So looking at the other side then, with Sonny Edwards, people will look at him and say he's a 22 fight bro, 21 wins, only that lost to Bam Rodriguez. If he ends up getting beaten by Galal Yafai, who is, in some people's eyes as a pro, is very early on into their career, does that have a damaging effect on him? Or do you think he's just one of those people, just like you said, kind of holds his hands up and says, yeah, got beaten tonight, moving on, whatever, moves up a weight? How do you think that could play out if your prediction is right and Yafai gets his hand raised on Saturday?
It's a much more damaging defeat for Edwards than it would be for Yafai, because it doesn't matter how good the person in front of you is or how well they box on the night. If you lose to someone who's 8-0 as a former world champion, then that doesn't look good. And he will fall. His stock will fall if he loses to Yafai. That's just the business. It's snakes and ladders, isn't it? And he might then find himself in a place where he has to rebuild a bit and take fights for less money than he's used to. Or he could step up a weight. He will have thought about this. He won't be entertaining defeat. Not now, it's fight week. But he will have had a strategy and a plan. And none of it will involve, none of it will involve specifically, etched in any kind of stone, what's the route if I lose? And he may not have spoken about it to anybody, but he'll have thought about it. The risk reward of taking this fight, because if it's all risk and no reward, or if the risk is too big, then I just don't think he'd do it, because it's just not good sense. But I think obviously he feels he's going to win. But I think it's a compliment to Galal Yafai that he puts Galal Yafai in that bracket whereby, should he lose, he presumably wouldn't feel like it would be some kind of horrific defeat that would see people call for the end of his career, because I don't think people would be, because people do move quicker in the lower weights. And we know if Yafai's going to win, he's going to have to be spectacular. He's going to have to be better than he's ever been his entire life. That's the kind of performance that he's going to have to give to beat Edwards, because he is a really good fighter and he's got that level of consistency now whereby you just cannot. There's no way that Sonny Edwards isn't going to turn up on Saturday. Not a chance.
Yeah, it's a fascinating contest. I think you're right. I think it will be close, and it'll have a bit of everything. But yeah, look forward to that. I'm also looking forward to Cameron Vong versus Gavin Gwynn on that card. That has got all the ingredients to be a really good fight. But for those people who want to watch that, that's live on DAZN this Saturday. I take it you're not doing anything for that. It's not your platform, no radio or anything. You're going to be able to sit at home and watch it and enjoy it from the comfort of your settee.
Yeah, I'll be watching it. I'll be watching that at home. You know, there's good fights on that card. You mentioned Vong against Gwyn, but there's Walker against Ritson. You know, that's a good fight. There's it's just a good card. Like the top 4 fights are all solid, and from what I'm told, it's sold well. It should look good on TV, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it should be, you know, it should be a good night. We've got 3 good weekends coming up in a row of domestic cards actually, because Queensbury have got a really good solid one the week after, and Denzel Bentley against Brad Pauls. Other good fights on that card too. And then Sky have got Jonas against Habazin, Lauren Price on that one, Lee Cutler against McKenna. That's a good interesting fight. And
That's a really
it's
good
good
scrap,
that
that.
yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, it was great, that fight. And it's good that we're getting these solid UK shows in the midst of all the Saudi boxing, because
Yeah.
we need that. We need that. We can't have a situation whereby all good UK fights go to Saudi, and that's not been the case. That's not been the case. But people have been a bit worried about that. That every time people moot, or Bawatsiyard, wouldn't that be a great fight? Or Hamza Shiraz against someone, wouldn't that be a great fight? That basically they're all just going to end up there, which it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good. But we've got 3 good weekends in a row where we've got a lot of good British fighters showcased. And Saturday it is a great example because it's a real high level fight.
It's been a busy year for boxing, but it feels like a busy year kind of overseas rather than being in the UK. Apparently that's going to change in the new year, and I just want to get your opinion on this on the podcast. I know we've had a chat about it, you know, when we've caught up, but with Frank Warren's Queensbury Promotions going to DAZN, Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing already being on DAZN, DAZN are saying between those two and Golden Boy and the Conlands and all the other people that they do business with, they're saying they're going to do about 150 shows next year. And so the rumours are on the Jungle Drums is that DAZN want both Queensbury and Matchroom to be putting on at least 12 UK shows each next year. If that is the case, that is good news, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that makes total sense. The figure of 150, I don't know how you get there, but it doesn't matter because you don't need 150 shows.
No.
You don't. I mean they've got Misfits as well, like you say. GBM are on it in the UK. Top Tier are on it. We've got the Conlon shows. There's Golden Boy. They've taken some Salita shows in the US as well, and then there's Matchroom in the US too. Who knows? Maybe Queensbury will have a bit of interest in doing the odd show over there. They've signed some overseas fighters. They've got promotional deals, Matchroom with quite a lot of other people. So yeah, maybe you could get there, but it doesn't matter because they've got a lot of good content to give people now. And what's been interesting too is watching Box Nation reignite, and also Huge Boxing, which is the Sims, who are obviously very Matchroom connected to Matchroom, and so Matchroom and Queensbury now have both got their lower tier of promotions that they can use to put fighters on. If the zone are thinking, look, let's do 12 each, maybe 15 at a push, but let's say 12. But they need to be big shows. They need to be arena shows. And obviously they'll make sure they never go on the same weekend because they're on the same network. So that whole situation when it starts is going to be really, really interesting. And then you've got Saudi above that too. And that again will be interesting because we had a really busy year with that last year. We're starting with Fury and Garnu, and then there was Knockout Chaos before Christmas. Then there was AJ and Garnu, and then there was Fury Usyk, and then there was 5 versus 5, and then there was Los Angeles, and then there was Wembley, Beterbiev Bivol, Billum Smith, and then the rematch. I mean, what's that? That's like 9 or 10. That's
Been a
9
lot.
or 10 massive nights in 15 months. I suspect it may not keep going at that rate.
Yeah.
Which means that the domestic program is going to be a bit more important than it was this year, maybe. And And other people need to respond to it. You know, Boxer need to respond to that on Sky, because they'll have done 8 UK shows this year by the time we have the one in Liverpool in December. And I'm not speaking out of turn here when I say that's not enough.
Yeah.
You need to be doing 12 to 15, I think, plus pay-per-views, which is Saudi. And if we get that, that's going to be a really healthy situation, isn't it? Because you'll have, say, like 36 domestic shows, and then the Saudi stuff, which basically everyone really has an interest in. So it's like you've got these different leagues, and then you've got this like Champions League up there that everybody's interested in. But then below that, you've got the kind of lower leagues of Box Nation, huge. Steve Wood has got shows on Boxing News now. One was headlined by Brad Ray. Another one's being headlined by Zelfa Barrett, who's a matchroom fighter. You know, that I like that. I think that tier system is really good, because you can loan fighters out to it, and a bit more cooperation between promoters is always a good thing. So that kind of pyramid we've got it's looking pretty solid, and you always want competition. I really hope TNT stay in boxing. I didn't mention them, but I really hope they do, because you want as many people as possible to be covering the sport and putting on good shows, because it's more opportunities for fighters. It's more for people to watch. It's just better all around.
It is, and we should be in a position in 2025 onwards with all the people you mentioned, and there's probably a couple as well which weren't mentioned, that we get to a point where in the UK I'm talking about, where there is at least one decent show every week. Like there are enough promoters, enough broadcasters, and enough boxers to put on something decent 50 weeks out of 52, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there probably is. I missed out Wasserman, which I shouldn't have, because, you know, Calla and Issa Soundland have been around for ages, and they got their Channel 5 deal. That's terrestrial TV. It's important that stays. I've not heard anything to suggest that it won't, but you hear rumours all the time, don't you? Oh, Sky are going to pull out of boxing, or ESPN are, or this or that. And nobody should want any of those things to happen. I know that people are in competition with each other, and it might seem like, well, you know, if the pie gets smaller because there are fewer people covering the sport, then our market share will get bigger. And you just think, just a bigger pie is the way forward.
Yeah.
And then the percentage you've got at the minute will get bigger by itself without you having to do too much. So that's what you want. That's always what you want. But there's more boxing available to watch now than there has ever been, and also the standard of it in terms of what it looks like on screen is different now, because people started streaming their fight nights a while ago. I remember doing the Matchroom Fight Pass 10 years ago. That was maybe the first time that a major promoter had looked to do that. But the Box Nation stuff we've been working on, you know, there's 2 commentators, there's 3 people in the studio. There's Jake and Ian's lads, Brain Cup Media, doing the production for it, who do all the stuff out in Saudi during fight week. It's well resourced, you know, it really is. And I do think that that's a result of the money that has made its way to promoters via the Saudi enterprise. It's trickling down. I think it is, because the level of those Box Nation shows, for example, is not something I've experienced working on shows that have been streamed before. It's not. It's genuinely, it's not.
No, it's in a good place, and it'll be interesting to see how things unfold. But Andy, always a pleasure to catch up. Thank you so much for your time. And for those of you who haven't already got the book, we'll put a link in the description for you to go and check that out and give it a search on